Hello and welcome back. If you're here again, you already know what this space asks of you. It doesn't demand belief. It doesn't insist on fear. It only asks that you stay long enough for the noise to settle. These stories don't arrive with warnings. They don't knock loudly. They slip in quietly, through half-closed doors, through pauses we don't notice until something starts standing in them. Beyond the veil, truth doesn't always look ancient. Sometimes it wears modern names, lives in high-rise apartments, moves through crowded cities that never stop breathing. Mumbai is one of those cities. Bright, restless, alive. A place where belief and disbelief share the same streets, and where it's very easy to mistake performance for power. Not every ritual is sacred. Not every guide believes what they teach. And not every lie is told with the intention to harm. Tonight's story lives in that fragile space, where intention matters less than consequence, where myths don't stay buried, and where pretending long enough can sometimes wake something that was never meant to listen. So take a moment, lower your shoulders, let the outside world keep rushing without you. We're about to step beyond the veil, and some doors, once opened, don't care why you opened them. You're listening to Vixen Beyond the Veil. Tonight's story is called The Veilkeeper of Mumbai. This is part 1. The Veilkeeper's performance. Let's begin. Mumbai never truly slept, but on certain evenings it slowed its breathing, just enough to notice itself, just enough to listen to the rain as it slid down glass facades and gathered in quiet, shimmering pools along streets that usually refuse to pause. In Lower Parel, where luxury towers rose like careful promises and old mill roads still remembered what labor sounded like, the evening carried that particular weight of damp air and expectation, the kind that pressed softly against the skin and made even familiar places feel slightly altered. The building stood apart from its neighbors, tall and immaculate, all muted gold lighting and private security, its entrance framed by manicured plants that had never known real soil, only imported earth and careful maintenance. Cars glided in and out of the driveway without horns, without hurry, tires whispering over wet concrete as the rain softened everything it touched. From a distance, the building looked serene, almost indifferent, as though nothing within its walls could ever truly unravel. Several floors above the city, in an apartment where the windows overlooked a maze of glowing streets and red signal lights blinking patiently through the rain, the living room had been transformed. Heavy curtains were drawn tight, shutting out the city entirely, and the overhead lights were switched off, leaving the room lit only by the warm, deliberate glow of candles arranged in a wide circle on the floor. Thin tendrils of smoke curled upward from burning incense, the scent of sandalwood and camphor blending into something both comforting and unsettling, while the air itself felt warmer than it should have, thick enough to make each breath noticeable. At the center of the circle sat a woman dressed in flowing indigo cotton, the fabric loose around her arms, her posture calm and grounded, as though she had been sitting this way for far longer than the last few minutes. Silver rings caught the candlelight on her fingers, glinting faintly as her hands rested, palms upward, on her knees. Her dark hair was braided neatly over one shoulder, not severe, not casual, but carefully chosen to suggest a balance between reverence and ease. Her eyes were closed. Opposite her sat another woman, older, visibly tense, her fingers twisting together in her lap as though she were afraid to let them rest. She wore a simple kurta, damp slightly at the hem from the rain outside, and her gaze kept flicking between the candle flames and the woman at the center of the circle, searching for something she could not quite name.
You said you could help.
The woman whispered finally, her voice breaking the silence like a fragile thing.
They told me you could hear what others can't.
The woman in indigo did not open her eyes immediately. When she spoke, her voice was low, steady, measured, the kind of voice that did not rush grief or interrupt fear.
I can listen,
She said gently.
What answers come through aren't always what we expect, but they are always what we're ready to hear.
The older woman swallowed hard.
I don't need miracles.
She said quickly, as if afraid of asking for too much.
I just want to know if he's at peace.
The woman in indigo nodded slowly, as though acknowledging something unseen.
Before we begin, I need you to speak your name out loud.
My name?
Yes,
The woman in indigo replied calmly.
names anchor us. Both sides need them.
After a brief hesitation, the woman straightened slightly and said,
My name is Nandini.
The woman in indigo inclined her head, committing it to memory.
And the one you wish to speak to, I need his full name. Say it clearly.
The candle flames flickered, bending inward just slightly as though leaning closer. Nandini's throat tightened.
His name was Rajat Malhotra.
The name seemed to settle heavily into the room, and the incense smoke twisted in unfamiliar patterns, curling back toward the circle instead of rising away from it. The woman in indigo placed both palms flat against the floor now, her rings chiming softly as she shifted, and for the first time her posture changed. Not dramatically, but unmistakably, becoming more deliberate, more focused.
Rajat Malhotra.
She repeated, slowly, carefully, as though testing the weight of the name.
Born to this world, now absent from it.
She drew in a measured breath.
Rajat Malhotra.
She called again, her voice firm but respectful, carrying an old cadence that felt rehearsed and yet intimate.
If you are willing, if you are able, and if you recognize the voice that calls you, step forward now. You are heard. You are allowed to speak.
The room seemed to hold its breath. There was a long pause, too long to be comfortable. Then the woman's brow furrowed faintly and her lips parted, her expression shifting as though something unseen had leaned close.
He's here.
She said quietly, still not opening her eyes.
Not as you remember him. That takes time.
Nandini gasped softly, one hand flying to her mouth.
He's here?
Yes, and he's very concerned that you blame yourself.
Nandini froze.
I never told anyone that.
The woman in indigo tilted her head slightly as though listening more closely.
He says you keep replaying the last conversation.
She continued, her words slow, deliberate.
He says you wonder if staying longer would have changed anything.
Tears spilled freely now.
That was the last thing I said to him.
Nandini whispered.
I told him I'd call back. I never did.
The candle flames shuddered, one guttering briefly before steadying again.
He wants you to stop carrying that burden. He says the silence wasn't your fault. It was simply where the story ended.
Nandini broke then, shoulders shaking, grief finally given permission to surface. And without opening her eyes, the woman at the center of the circle extended one hand, placing 2 fingers lightly against Nandini's wrist, exactly where her pulse raced.
Breathe.
She murmured.
Let him speak without interrupting him with guilt.
The room seemed to settle. After a few moments, the woman in indigo drew her hand back and slowly, deliberately opened her eyes, the candlelight reflecting in them as though she were emerging from a deep, distant place.
That's all he has for you tonight.
She said gently.
Sometimes that's enough.
Nandini wiped her face, nodding repeatedly, her voice thick when she spoke again.
Thank you.
She said, reverent now, almost afraid to break the moment.
Thank you, Veilkeeper.
The woman inclined her head slightly.
Take care of yourself. And remember, listening goes both ways.
The candle burned steadily once more. The door closed behind her with a soft click. The sound oddly final in the quiet that followed, and for a few seconds longer than necessary, the woman in indigo remained seated within the circle, her spine straight, her hands still resting on her knees, her eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the far wall, as though she were waiting for something else to happen, something unscripted, something that might betray the careful performance she had just delivered. The candles burned steadily. The incense continued to smoke. Nothing moved. Only then did the Veilkeeper exhale, slowly, deliberately, the breath leaving her lungs like the release of a held posture rather than relief. And she tilted her head back slightly, rolling her shoulders as though easing herself out of a role she had been holding for too long.
All right.
She murmured to the empty room, her voice lower now, flatter, stripped of its ceremonial softness.
That's done.
She stood, crossed the circle, and reached behind the tall bookshelf near the window, her fingers finding the switch without looking, and with a faint mechanical hum, the fog machine powered down. The last wisps of manufactured mist thinning quickly as though embarrassed to have lingered. The change was immediate. Candles were snuffed out with efficient puffs of breath, one after the other, until the room fell into partial darkness, illuminated only by the muted glow of the city leaking in through the edges of the curtains. Silver rings were slipped off and dropped into a shallow drawer with a quiet clink. The indigo cotton robe loosened and shrugged off her shoulders, folding itself into a heap on the arm of the sofa to reveal a simple black tank top and worn lounge pants beneath. Unremarkable, comfortable, real. Windows were cracked open, letting the damp Mumbai air rush in, carrying with it the distant sounds of traffic and rain. And hidden fans whirred to life, pulling the last traces of incense out into the night. The scent of sandalwood and camphor was quickly overtaken by the sharper tang of cleaning spray as she wiped down the floor where symbols had been carefully chalked and erased dozens of times before. She moved through the room with the practiced efficiency of someone who had dismantled illusion hundreds of times before, sank into the dining chair with a familiar sigh, the performance fully shed now, and pulled the leather-bound notebook resting on the dining table toward her. Its cover was worn soft at the edges, creased from years of use, her name stamped discreetly along the bottom corner. Nothing decorative, nothing mystical, just Tara Deshpande in clean, unembellished lettering. She flipped it open and began to write, pen moving quickly, efficiently, as though she were recording data rather than dismantling belief. Her handwriting neat, compact, and economical.
Strong response to guilt cues.
She muttered under her breath as she wrote.
Pulse spiked at name reveal. Protective attachment confirmed. Silence held too long. Nearly lost her there.
She paused, tapping the pen thoughtfully against the page, then added,
Reinforce absolution earlier next time.
Tara leaned back in the chair, rubbing her eyes with the heels of her palms, exhaustion settling into her bones in the quiet, unglamorous way it always did once the performance ended. Carrying other people's grief, she had learned, was not heavy in the way tragedy was heavy, but in the way repetition was, layer upon layer of borrowed sorrow that never quite belonged to her and yet never fully left either. She did not think of herself as a fraud. She thought of herself as a facilitator. There were rules after all, and Tara adhered to them with almost religious devotion. Rules she had built early and never broken. No blood, no possessions, no promises of miracles, no theatrics that crossed the line from comfort into harm. People came to her because they were hurting, not because they wanted chaos. And what she offered, she reminded herself often, firmly, was guided closure, a ritualized space where grief could be spoken aloud without judgment and without consequence. The tricks, when she bothered to call them that, were practical, humane, and tested. Cold reading, for one, was not mind reading at all, but pattern recognition, sharpened by years of observation, the way people held themselves when speaking about loss, the words they avoided, the ones they lingered on. Planted accomplices, carefully briefed, blended easily into waiting rooms and online sessions, feeding her fragments of information that could later be received during the ritual. Chants were rehearsed, not for authenticity, but for cadence, because rhythm mattered more than meaning when it came to calming a nervous system. Lighting, too, was deliberate, warm, directional, low enough to blur edges, but never so dim as to cause discomfort. Fog machines concealed behind antique furniture softened the room just enough to make movement seem suggestive rather than mechanical. And silence, when deployed correctly, did most of the work all on its own. She had learned early that people filled quiet spaces with their own truths far more readily than they filled noise. It had all begun years ago with one coincidence she had never fully explained. One session where she had said the right thing at the right time and watched a stranger break down in relief. And the internet had done what it always did with moments like that. Amplified them, embellished them, demanded more. A clip had gone viral, messages had flooded in, someone, somewhere had named her. And the Veilkeeper had been born, not out of deception, but out of momentum. Tara, who had always been observant, intuitive, deeply attuned to human patterns, had simply learned to stay ahead of the story, refining it, packaging it, making sure it remained just believable enough to comfort without even promising the impossible. Mumbai made it easy to disappear into reinvention. By night, Tara traded candles for neon, incense for alcohol, grief-stricken clients for loud music, and louder friends. She stepped into clubs where the bass rattled the ribcage and the air smelled of sweat, perfume, and ambition, where people with carefully curated lives pretended not to look at their phones while counting likes and story views in the reflections of mirrored walls. There was Ruhi, her PR manager, who spoke in hashtags and deadlines and insisted that vulnerability was a brand asset. Kabir, who handled sponsorships and always knew which collaborations would survive a scandal and which wouldn't. Anushka and Samir, regulars in her weekend circle, influencers in adjacent niches. Loud, affectionate, exhausting, the sort of people who believed that if you danced hard enough, nothing could catch you. Tara fit in easily there too, sharp-witted and charming. Her public persona softened into something more recognizably human beneath flashing lights. The Veilkeeper temporarily set aside in favor of someone who laughed too loudly and drank too quickly, and allowed herself, briefly, to forget the weight of other people's stories. Tara was still staring at the open notebook, her pen resting idly between her fingers, when her phone buzzed against the table, vibrating insistently enough to rattle slightly against the wood. She frowned, glancing at the screen. Anushka. She hesitated, then answered, lifting the phone to her ear.
Tell me this is important.
Tara said, already leaning back in her chair. A burst of noise exploded through the speaker. Music thumping somewhere in the background, overlapping voices, laughter cutting in and out, before Anushka's voice finally came through, bright and unapologetically loud.
Friday.
Anushka announced without preamble.
Same place, same chaos. And don't even think about bailing this time, Veilkeeper.
Tara winced slightly at the nickname.
I'm really not in the mood tonight.
She replied, rubbing at her temple.
I just wrapped a session and
Oh, please.
Anushka cut in.
You say that every week and then you show up looking devastating and drink everyone under the table.
Someone else leaned into the call, their voice closer, more amused.
She does.
Samir added.
Like it's a public service.
Tara huffed a short laugh despite herself.
You're both terrible influences.
Correction. We're excellent influences with bad timing.
There was a brief scuffle for the phone, followed by a familiar, calmer voice.
Tara,
Kabir said, cutting cleanly through the noise.
you need this. You've been buried in work all week, and if you don't come out with us, you're going to spiral and start overthinking again.
She closed her eyes, exhaling slowly.
I am not spiraling.
You reorganized your entire schedule at 2 in the morning.
Kabir replied dryly.
That's spiraling adjacent.
Anushka reappeared.
Also,
She added sweetly.
Kabir says first round's on him.
There was a pause. Tara glanced once more around the room, the extinguished candles, the half-erased symbols on the floor, the lingering sense that something had almost, but not quite, slipped through.
I really shouldn't.
She said, more to herself than to them.
Friday?
Anushka repeated, firm now.
No excuses.
Tara sighed, long and low, leaning her head back against the chair.
Fine.
She said at last.
But I'm leaving early.
Cheers erupted through the phone. Loud and triumphant.
See?
Anushka said.
We knew you'd cave.
Tara ended the call, setting the phone face down on the table. Outside, the rain continued to fall over Lower Parel, the city humming steadily beneath it. Unaware that somewhere between a ritual undone and a night yet to begin, a door had already been nudged slightly off its hinges, and soon enough someone would step through. And that's where we'll pause for tonight. Some beginnings don't arrive loudly. They arrive carefully, wrapped in ritual, comfort, and the promise that nothing real has changed. If this story made you question how easily grief invites certainty, or how performance can feel like truth when someone knows exactly where to stand, then it's already doing its work. Beyond the veil, not every door is opened with intention. Some are opened with need. And some are opened simply because no one thought to check what might be listening. If you felt drawn into this story, you can support the channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing. It helps these stories find the listeners who already sense that the world isn't quite as sealed as it pretends to be. We'll continue soon, because what's been introduced tonight has not finished arriving. Until then, thank you for listening, for staying through the unease, and for trusting me to guide you here. I am Ipsha. This was Vixen Beyond the Veil. Take care of yourself. And when you're ready, you may step back into the city. Just remember, some performances linger long after the lights go out.